So today let's talk a little bit about violence as a signal of strength and power. And I think one of those first things that we saw of this president showing that violence came when he was first running for president, some 15, no, 12, 13 years ago. And that was slurs and names he was calling people. Yeah, it doesn't sound like a lot, right? But the thing is that that was a signal of violence because now denigration is part of the language that he was speaking, and it was also part of the language that the other people around him were speaking. A way to show that there's no respect for your opponent when, if you're running at that level, when you're running to try to, to try to steer a country to a better thing, that way of really mistreating your opponents, not only your opponent, he was mocking everyone. And again, at that level, mocking everyone, taking their power, making sure not taking their power. Because mocking is not really taking their power. Mocking is a way for you to really don't have to find a way, an intelligent way to take their points down. And now you're simply going and simply using some of these names just to deviate the attention that you don't know what you're talking about because you can't have a strong point against that person. So now you have to attack them. That is simply a lazy way of trying to put you up. Thing is that it's work and it continues to work for him. He constantly does that, and people simply got used to it. This is not the people on the street. This is the president, the highest office in this country, not only this country, around the world. It does that with everyone. So that shows certain level of violence that is very apparent to whoever that is listening. It's like, wait, what just happened? Didn't we we're supposed to treat each other with some kind of respect or something? And the moment that you start talking to someone in those ways, denigrating them, even to their face, even when there's the room full of people, because it's one thing that this is something that we all do. We go into our houses, we go to our spouses, to our important other people, we go to our friends, and all of a sudden we talk to someone in a really bad way. That is just us blowing steam off, just off dealing with stuff. But when you're having a debate, when you're having discussions, when you are steering the country somewhere, that is not the place to do it. But that is a way to show power. That is a way to being violent. And it's something this president has really, really latched onto. You see that also, that kind of violence go up a level when now that he's got power, all of a sudden he decides that because he has one of the better armies of the world, he has an elite force of people that have been trained to implement this, to implement their actions of war, pretty much. He decides that, you know what? I'm going to go to Venezuela. I'm going to pick Maduro. And then I'm going to bring him here. And I'm going to say that it's all because of drugs. And again, Maduro's no angel. Maduro's no saint. He had to be taken out one way or the other, mostly or especially by his own people, by his own people. Thing is that his own people was trying to do it, and they were not able. By that I mean the Venezuelans were voting, were using something that we thought was useful. Thing is that Maduro had really corrupted government to a level. Well, he didn't. He came from Chavez and before that, so it's a long story there. But the reality is that he went in, he took Maduro out, and then he said, "Oh, we did it because of the drugs." But also, if that was true, what were happening about all of the other members of Maduro's cabinets that were in the same thing? Maduro was not doing all of this alone. He was doing it with his own government, and the high levels of government were doing it. So he did not take any one of them. He just wanted a display of power. He just wanted that violent action that seemed, violence that seemed constrained. That is like an oxymoron. Violence that seems constrained. So he went in, he took his elite force, let's get it out, and he's shown not only to us, because I'm pretty sure the military people, They must be, they were very like, wow, man, this is the kind of things that I do like. These are the kind of things that I've been training for, and most likely they were proud. And do be proud that an action came out, and it came out in a successful way. But also feel ashamed that that was your use. Feel ashamed that the president used you and your skills for something that he had no power to do, because there was no, he's not, he can go out into the world and start kidnapping the leaders of other countries, because that was Maduro. He may also be thinking the same thing about Cuba, because that is violence too. The way that the United States has blocked Cuba from access to many goods is a way of violence, steadily, steadily strangling them, all the way to today. That there's no energy going to Cuba, and that the people having all of the trash in the streets and everything else. And what are they expecting? That if the Cuban government strangles their own people, that if the U.S. strangles Cuba, that all of a sudden the people will revolt, like they did back in when Fidel did the revolt and toppled the government, and all of a sudden be a loving U.S. country. That I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know, have no idea how these guys are thinking about that. But that is not the way that it happens. That's violence. Those people are starving. Those people are desperate to have a life like you and I have it, and we will not let them. But he's not thinking about taking Venezuela out the same way, because he wanted. Sorry, he was not thinking about taking Cuba the same way he took Venezuela. Most likely because Cuba doesn't have the petroleum, doesn't have the oil that Venezuela does. So he went in, he took him out, and he called it drugs. And now, of course, he took the oil. What's going to happen now? That's not, again, that is violence that was palpable and was seen. And yet Congress did nothing. And that violence, it repeated itself when it went against Iran. And he didn't kidnap anyone. He said, let's simply bomb the crap out of Iran. And then let's send some military forces to keep bombing them and keep destroying them. Simply violence for what? Because he didn't like it. There's many countries in the world that you don't like. There's many countries in the world that simply don't have the same type of governments that we have, don't have the same stability that we have. Some of those countries are starting towards a path that we can recognize, towards a path that will bring them to some form of government that is respectful of everyone in their country. Some others are not. Some others are very violent. Some others are very repressive against their people, even when it looks like their people are flourishing, even when it looks like their economy is getting better. But this representation of violence, of bombing everyone because they didn't like it, of killing everyone, and then going into a war that he had no power, because war is a power of Congress. And Congress is sitting on its hands because they know that this president is violent if the members of his own party go against him. And the thing is that it works because his own violence, when it's turned against his own party, against those members of Congress, will make them unelectable. Yep. They simply try to run. He would say no, and then they will lose. Because for some reason, and this is something that I cannot follow, how is it that you can have a person that is so violent and you see only twilight, you see only glory, you only see the angelic curls around this guy? This is something that I cannot understand of why the people keep electing him. And that violence, it also goes when it shows that he wants to kidnap people in our own streets. People that do not look white. Because that is exactly what it is. On all of the cases on why can ICE stop people? Because, police has to have a reason. That's what everyone knows. But not ICE. It turns out that the courts told ICE that they can pick anyone that doesn't look white. They can be racist in their selection. So if your accent is not what they expect, if your skin is not what they expect, then they can kidnap you. Simple and easy. And that is violence. That is violence of the president against his own citizens, against the people that live here. And that is violence that is demonstrated every single day. It's violence that causes not only having people tossed in, I won't call them jails, but cages, but it's also made people die because that is a way of showing, on his terms, of showing strength, of saying and showing that I can do whatever I want. The other type of violence is violence by abandonment, pretty much. We abandon other countries. We abandon ideals of bringing democracy, of bringing our way of our understanding of the world to the rest of the countries of the world when USA was destroyed. It was a way to show that we cared. It was a way to show that, hey, we will try to help all of these different initiatives, all of these different countries that we had, because we think that if we help them, they will become better, they will become our partners in the end, but also because good ideas come from anywhere. They're not the property of the US. You can have a genius, someone that will bring the next great idea from somewhere else that will want to come to the US to study, to live, and to create. But that is not something that you will want to do in a country that tosses you aside. So the moment that we stop bringing the help that we're bringing, we simply cattle pull the participants of people that think that we are good, of people that may have some idea because we simply stop helping them. We also create a negative sentiments like, yeah, the US is not as great as we thought. The US is not as great as we were led to believe. We might as well go to some other place. Let's bring whatever is it that is good in us to these other places and make them better. So when we forgot about that, when we destroyed the US aid agency because we were doing what? Trying to be efficient, trying to cut cost. Yeah, that guy was crazy, man. That guy was not simply thinking right. His idea was let's use some kind of computer algorithm that I have no idea how government works, but I have this idea in my head of how it should be, and let's do that. And then the other guy just let them run rampant and do whatever they want without care. That is simply that is simply violence. That's mindless violence. You didn't have to throw one punch. You just had to destroy all of the government programs that had to uh, that dealt with helping in the end. And for all that they say it isn't true, for all that they say that that didn't cause anything, the reality is there. The reports have been slowly coming in that when you cut services, when you cut the help, water was cut short, health services were cut short, and that in the end is causing a starvation and is slowly causing death. Ebola is one of those things that is happening today that is simply running amok a group of people that, for whatever reason, are very untrustworthy, or to people that were trained to help them prevent those kind of deaths. But now that the services were cut because these benefits were cut from us, that problem is going to spread. And if you haven't learned anything of what happens when some kind of microorganism runs around the globe and starts causing some kind of health issues, then maybe you're five. What is it? Because well, maybe you're six. Because the pandemic just happened. If that was not an example of what happens when a microorganism roam rampant across the world and causes health issues, well, you will not be happy if you were able to get Ebola. And we were there trying to help that, trying to prevent those kind of things. We're there trying to prevent those kind of crisis from happening. We know this because we have scientists that have gone throughout the world, throughout time, understanding the way that they work and working to prevent something of that level. Now, if I were president, I would not use violence as a cudgel for power. I will simply try to use. I will simply try to come back to that level of cherishing each other, because we can have disagreements, we can have strong disagreements, but that doesn't mean that I have to denigrate you. When the thing is, I like orange and you like purple, there's not a problem. But those are not the kind of disagreements that we have. We have to figure out why is it that we disagree here, what is the kernel of the disagreement, and then try to hash it out. Because in the end, we're all trying to live in the same place, making sure that everyone is taken care of. And that is a very broad statement that will bring many different ideas on how that is to happen. And that is what brings a discussion. What can we address? Uh, I guess the better example is healthcare. We simply can have healthcare that is inclusive of everyone, because we cannot get together and think about what that means and think about why is it that there are many other places around the world that do it this way and works for them, but then we want to do it this other way and it's not working. It hasn't worked for 75 years, but because of some differences, some ideological differences, some other structural differences, we haven't been able. But if we start calling each other names and everything else, we won't ever get to it. And that will also show strength through perseverance, because that discussion has been happening for how long? We haven't come with a good solution for it. That means that if our president, I have to work every single day to make sure that we keep understanding what the kernel, what that simple basic premise is that I would say simple, but that we disagree on. How is it that can we make sure that we have this thing going on? Because the president, when you look at what a president does, the president in the end is not only, is nothing more than an administrator. Congress creates laws, and the president administers those laws through the federal government. The president is not there to be the one on and be all. We made it so because I think that in the end, what happened was the president is one single point. It's easy to power every single idea of what we think that things should be into this one person, because Congress is not that. Congress is one of many. It's one of many, many, many other people that are there fighting for something. But if we can focus everything that we have in this one person, then it's easier for us to imagine that that person should have that power. And I think we gave too much power to that idea, and that should not be so, because in the end, it shouldn't be so. In the end, the president is there to administer everything. Congress will give in programs to run. It will say this is the money, and the president, a good administrator, will say is, I have all of this money and all of these activities. Something's got to give, and then work with Congress, saying you're saying all of these different things to do, but you haven't given me enough money to do it. So how do we work with it? And a good administrator will try to make everything work, but the reality is that they will know that it isn't, and then it's part of their work to go back and say, "Hey, Congress, we're short here, or you wanted this way, and it's not kind of working. There's failures here, there's failures there. We need to address it," and that is good governance in the end, because when we see that things are working because we're there working every day to make sure that they work, it's easy to show their benefit. It's easy to show this is what you said you wanted to do, so let's do it. But it's also important to say this is not working. But then you don't have the power to do whatever you want. You have to go back to Congress and say, hey, Congress, this is not working. these were the laws and the monies that you put out there, and this is not working. We need to work to make sure that a change happens in a way that we can make it work. So that's perseverance in the end. Is going and showing up every day and understanding and collecting the data, collecting all of the information, collecting the sentiment of the people to make sure that Congress can enact the laws that they need to. And I think that in the end, the better way to show strength is through compassion. Because simply, we will be in a position of power, but not everyone will be in a position of power. When I try to understand all of those people that will be under my care, because as a president, the people are under your care. You need to be very understanding of whatever condition is out there that will make them have a hard life, have a hard day. You need to work and understand that when they're mad at you, that when they're happy at you, when they're sad, when they're down, you need to be there to support everyone, to show that sometimes some decisions will be very difficult. Some decisions will be decisions that many people will disagree, but it will be up to you to try to show with kindness, with compassion, why those were good decisions without taking anyone down, without talking down to them. It would be a way to say, I don't need to denigrate you. I don't need to make fun of you. I don't need to kick you. I just need to offer either a supporting hand, either a willing ear. Because in the end, I'm trying as a president to do my best for not only you, but for everyone that lives in this country.